So in the hills of eastern Bosnia sits the small town of Srebrenica, once known for silver mines and health spas, now infamous for the genocide that occurred there during the Bosnian War. In July 1995, when the town fell to Serbian forces, 12,000 Muslim men and boys fled through the woods, seeking safe territory. Hunted for 6 days, more than 8,000 were captured, killed at execution sites, and later, as we've heard, buried in mass graves. Tonight is the Scottish launch of Voices from Srebrenica. This is a book that shares with its readers the harrowing personal narratives by survivors. Voices from Srebrenica provides eyewitness accounts of the Bosnian genocide, revealing stories of individual trauma, loss, and resilience. And it is an honour to have with us tonight the two authors of Voices from Srebrenica, Hasan Hasanović and Professor Ann Petrila. Hasan is a survivor of the Bosnian genocide, and Professor Ann Petrila is a global expert on trauma and genocide, whose key focus has been on the Bosnian genocide. There will be an opportunity to ask questions of Hasan and Ann and Robert before we move on to a brief memorial to remember the victims of the genocide. So it now gives me great pleasure to just share a little bit of the background to Hasan before he shares with us his story. Hasan is a curator and interpreter at the Srebrenica-Potočari Memorial and Cemetery, and he is a survivor of the genocide. Hasan survived the genocide, but other family members did not, including his twin brother and his father. Hasan educates thousands of visitors each year at the memorial. He is frequently interviewed by the international press and the BBC, and has been a keynote speaker at events in universities and schools in numerous countries. He is a permanent member of the Peace March Organisation Committee, established to mark an annual anniversary of the genocide. I first met Hasan when we brought him over to Scotland, and he addressed the Scottish Parliament, and he's also addressed the Flemish House of Parliament. He's had a private reception at the UK Prime Minister's official office and residence at 10 Downing Street in 2013. Can't even remember who was the Prime Minister then, but I'm sure you'll be able to tell us. With the support of the Scottish First Minister, and did for Scotland to some degree also, he published a short memoir of his experience entitled Surviving Srebrenica, which has subsequently been published in numerous languages. He's currently working on the second edition of his memoir, and Hasan has co-authored The Voices from Srebrenica and has led a project with the Sarajevo War Child Museum, collecting children's stories of the genocide, and further projects collecting oral history stories on behalf of the Memorial Centre. He works to ensure that the genocide is not forgotten. It's a pleasure to introduce Hasan to you, and Hasan is also a close personal friend, so it's lovely to see him on screen. Hi, Hasan, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Maureen. First of all, I would like to greet all of you here tonight, and to thank Interfaith Scotland for the willingness to organize Srebrenica Remembrance Day and to organize also the book launch for us at the same time tonight. I was able to look at some of the screen photos and recognize some faces that I've met in Scotland, and of course I'm very happy to see you again. Thank you for wanting to join us tonight. How we started to write this book is really another story. We visited the places which we call execution sites. We have this annual visit on July 13th every year, visiting these sites with the mothers of Srebrenica in an organized convoy of 3 buses and a few private cars, escorted by the police, because it's not safe to go there for us, for survivors, because those places are populated by Serbs who live in total denial. So Robert, my friend Robert McNeil, mentioned that issue with the denial of the Srebrenica genocide. So we visited a place which is called Pilica. It is a former cultural center where 500 men and boys were trapped inside and killed. And among them was my father, you know. So I remember it was 7 years ago, and was laying a wreath with a friend who lives in St. Louis. Actually, she lives in Denver. Alma, her name is Alma. And Anne was sobbing, and I knew that she was crying because of me and the fact that my father was killed there. So then later she asked me, you know, if anything has been written on these people who were killed, and if anything had been written on the actual sites, which I replied no, and we sort of agreed to do something, to write something either about the individual people, those individual stories, or at the same time, or the factual narrative of those sites. At the beginning, you know, we wanted to do both, and even more the factual narrative than the oral histories of these individuals. So then, you know, we kept basically by time kept changing our structure. So I got in touch with survivors who I knew, who are powerful voices of this genocide, and I knew that their story should be part of this book. Then eventually, my brother, who survived the genocide, my younger brother, who is a famous journalist now in Bosnia, he suggested that we should go to Serbia to interview 4 people there, to also get the Serbian perspective, because everyone would, especially from the academic point of view, would you know, ask why there is no anything from that side in terms of, you know, the factual narrative which is being used in Serbia. So then Anne said no, because, you know, she said you are adding more and more people. Then we had to talk it through. Then eventually she said yes, but I was absolutely against an idea of going to Serbia there. You know, I said to Anne, you can go, you can hire an interpreter, but I'm not going with you, because in how I felt and how I feel even now, everything came from Serbia in terms of this war. Everything was organized there. Milosevic was in power. He was on the top of this hierarchy of evil, I would say. And they supported the Bosnian Serbs in waging this war, which actually led to the catastrophe in my family, I would say. So I said no. So then my younger brother said, you should go there, you should go there. But psychologically, I did not feel well. And I said, okay, I might go. Then I decided to go. But I took pills, those tranquilizers, just to try to make sure, if I don't feel well, that maybe those pills would calm me down. Or I actually didn't know how I would feel when I get there. So I was, of course, I was tense. Then we got to Belgrade and we met Žarko Korać, who was the MP in Serbian parliament. and he's a university professor. He's a really amazing guy. He was the actual prime minister for a day, for one day, when Prime Minister Djindjic was killed. So he was the oldest MP in the parliament. So by law, he had to act as a prime minister for that day before the new one was appointed. So we met with him, and then we interviewed the other amazing three amazing human rights activists who actually knew me, and then we had this amazing day with amazing people who we don't know much about, because all this throughout the Bosnian War, they kept on the other side from the Milosevic regime, trying to raise awareness of the actual war crimes here, and trying to basically do something for the public to understand that that there were terrible crimes being committed by the regime and by the Bosnian Serbs led by Karadzic and Ratko Mladic. So then it took, I would say, 5 years to work on the book. In the beginning, it was very difficult for me as a survivor. My book is also my story is also included in the book, and I had to translate every interview. There were very difficult moments when we interviewed some of the survivors who had to stop. They had to go to the restroom to wash up. Of course, we always offered them to stop, and we would not continue, but they always wanted to go on and tell their stories to the end, because they understood that it's important for the stories to be written and published. And they also knew me from the memorial, so they trusted me, without exceptions. And so it was, Anne was working on those transcripts, but I actually had to check all the transcripts. I had to listen to the translation. I had to listen to those testimonies in Bosnian and to match those things, and to actually find out if there were any errors and if things don't match. And sometimes Anne would not understand some things, so we called those gaps yellows. So I would have to check those yellows. For me, what was the biggest problem is, I remember when I translated the Nejad's interview, Robert mentioned Nejad, yes, and another survivor. I barely managed to translate his interview, because his story hits me so hard that I barely survived that translation. I took some pills, and I was happy that I survived that translation of his interview. So when later, a couple of months later, Anne finished his transcript, and she said, "You have to check the yellows." Of course, I felt, oh my God, I have to listen to Nejad again, So then I decided to actually leave him as actually my last transcript to be checked. So I checked everyone else before Nejad, because his story was really killing me. So then eventually, because probably of the other stories, it was somehow easier. And I found working on this, I would say, transcripts on everything in this book, therapeutic, and that actually helped me to deal with my own trauma and to overcome some of my fears, some of my issues, and step by step we were structuring the book, and we could see that the end was coming, that we could see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, which at the beginning we actually could not envision, because we collected an unbelievable amount of information. I did the factual check of collected the facts from the Hague Tribunal. Of course, Anne was doing the most of almost all of the writing and everything. But we were amazing partners in this. And the reason why I decided to do this with her, I said, okay, I have this memoir, which I did thanks to Maureen, thanks to Interfaith Scotland and other friends in Scotland, but mainly Maureen, who I will never forget that, of course. And I said, of course, I should try to work with somebody on the actual factual book, and maybe to include some of the oral histories. And of course, I knew Anne for years, and we were becoming, really good friends. And when I realized and when I saw how she delved, how she interacted with survivors, she became a true friend with Mothers of Srebrenica. She became true friends with other survivors of the Death March, and they accepted her as if she is a local. Sometimes she would say that it's not my story, in terms that she had to be careful how whatever she does, which is really something that I liked. So step by step, I said, there is no, I would say, a better person that I could work on this project, except for Anne, because she visited this place many times. She brought hundreds of students here, and she knew survivors. And survivors trust me because of my work at the memorial, but they also trusted her because they saw her many times at the memorial, and she was hanging out with me. So it was a perfect combo to do this. And I knew that how much she felt, how she feels this story, and how much she cares about survivors. And when she said, I would want people to look at these survivors in the way how I look at them, and feel the story how I feel the story. So which was actually the main moment when I said, yes, this is the person that I really would want to do this with. And we did these stories and with ultimate care and ethics, and it was an amazing journey of learning, of I would say compassion, and so when finally we were about to get it done, because we wanted to find a publisher, and it was big problem to find a publisher, because it's difficult. And I had a book launch of the Surviving Srebrenica, which was translated in Dutch. It was an event in the parliament in Brussels, in the Flemish parliament, and I had a lunch with a friend. He said, I asked him, I told him about the book, and he offered that he gets in touch with his publisher in the United States. And that's how actually we found the publisher, and we got an email with them expressing the willingness to publish the book, which was something that we really wanted, and we were very, very happy that they wanted to publish this book. But those deciding moments when I had to really be almost every minute with Anne to finish the book. I was in Scotland, for the Holocaust Memorial Day, and I was with Maureen. I was with on different events. I was in Berlin prison, or in other places, and I was out of reach, and she kept calling me all the time, and I was really, really tense, because of course I care about both. I care about the book, but I also care about Maureen. I care about Interfaith Scotland and all the events, and both things. It was difficult, but eventually, when I returned to Bosnia, I hope I was a little bit helpful, and eventually the book was done and got published, and here we are tonight. So yeah, I'm ready later for the other questions.
Thank you, Hasan. And I think even just in your beautiful explanation of how the book evolved and the power of listening to those stories and knowing your own history and how cathartic that must have been, but also how painful it was. I think it's made everyone here tonight, I'm sure, want to go out and purchase the book and read those stories, so that we don't just know the historical outline of what happened, but the actual human cost of what happened. I think that's so
Yes.
critical. So please, we will put before the end of the evening the link to the book in the chat, so that people can access it and read those stories for themselves.